Lucas was sitting on the couch, his shoulders hunched and his gaze lost. The room was silent, except for the sound of heavy breathing that he tried to disguise. His eyes revealed a deep tiredness, not only physical, but emotional. He ran his hands through his hair, as if searching for a way to reorganize the chaotic thoughts that filled his mind. "I don't know what to do anymore," he began, his voice low and hesitant. "It seems like everything fell apart at once, and the worst part is that I was always the one who solved everything, you know? The strong one. But now I feel broken." The psychologist, sitting across from him, kept his gaze calm and welcoming. He waited a moment before answering, giving Lucas space to breathe. "Lucas," he said calmly, "do you believe that this person who was always strong is still inside you?" Lucas gave a nervous, humorless laugh. "I want to believe, but it seems not. It seems like this person has disappeared." The psychologist leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on Lucas. "What you're feeling right now is real and valid. But what I want to show you today is that what you've been through doesn't have to be the end of the story. In fact, it can be the beginning of something even bigger. Believe it or not, the resilience you feel you've lost can be rebuilt, and stronger than before." Lucas sighed, still skeptical, but something in the psychologist's voice made him pay attention. He was there because he wanted to believe it was possible. He wanted to understand how someone could go through so much and still find the strength to keep going. The psychologist continued, "Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about getting up. Not as you were before, but as someone even stronger. Today, I want to help you see that that strength is still there, waiting to be activated." As Lucas looked at him, there was a mix of despair and hope in his eyes. He wasn't sure exactly how that would be possible, but he was willing to listen. Lucas took a deep breath before continuing. "I think everything started to fall apart when I lost my job. I had worked at that company for years, giving it my all. And then all of a sudden, the news came, 'We need to cut costs. You're a great employee, but we can't keep you.' It was a shock. I didn't know what to do." The psychologist remained silent for a moment, giving Lucas space to process. He knew that behind Lucas's words was a tangle of emotions: shame, anger, fear. "Losing your job was like losing part of your identity, wasn't it?" he asked, with a tone of understanding. Lucas nodded slowly. "Exactly. I've always defined myself by my work. I've always been the guy who made things happen, who could handle everything, and now it feels like I'm a nobody. I've tried to hide it, to move on, but nothing has worked. I feel like a failure." He lowered his eyes, clearly uncomfortable admitting these vulnerabilities. "And it didn't stop there. Losing my job ended up affecting my relationship. My partner started saying that I was distant, that I didn't seem like the same person anymore. And in the end, she left too. She said she didn't know if she could handle what I was going through." The psychologist saw the evident pain in Lucas's eyes. "It's a lot of weight to carry all at once. Losing your job would be hard enough on its own, but losing someone you trusted also makes it even more challenging. It's like the foundations that supported your life have collapsed." Lucas nodded, his voice shaking. "Exactly. And the worst part is that I tried to get back on my feet, you know. I started looking for work. I tried going out with friends, but nothing seemed to work out. Interviews were a fiasco because I just couldn't focus. And over time, I started avoiding even that. Avoiding people. Avoiding trying. It seemed easier to do nothing than to face more rejection." The psychologist leaned forward slightly, his expression encouraging. "What you're describing, Lucas, is something that many people face, especially after such difficult times. When life hits us hard, it's normal to feel paralyzed. Our brains go into survival mode, focusing more on protecting ourselves than on taking action. But here's the thing, resilience isn't something you've lost. It's something you can rebuild." Lucas looked up, intrigued but still skeptical. "Rebuild how? It seems impossible. All I see is how much I failed. The psychologist smiled slightly. That's because right now you're stuck in the narrative of failure. And that's okay. That's how many of us feel when we face major losses. But I want to give you a new perspective. Let's start by looking at the past. You've been through tough times before, right? Lucas thought for a moment. Yeah, I guess so. When I was in college, I lost a scholarship because I couldn't meet the requirements. It was devastating. I thought I would never graduate. And what happened after that? The psychologist asked, leading Lucas to explore what he had overcome. Well, Lucas replied, I ended up getting an internship and using that money to pay for tuition. It took me longer to graduate, but I did. In the end, it taught me to appreciate things more. Exactly, the psychologist said enthusiastically. At that moment you thought it was the end of the world, but you found a way to keep going. And you didn't just keep going, you grew from it. The resilience was there, even if you didn't realize it at the time. Lucas shook his head, absorbing the words. But it's different now. It feels so much bigger than it did before. It's natural that it does, the psychologist replied. Every challenge brings its own unique pain. But resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning from it, using the experience as fuel to move forward. Neuroscience shows us that our brains are moldable, which means we can train our minds to respond differently to difficulties. Resilience isn't just something that happens to you, it's something you build. Lucas looked mildly interested. But how do I start? Because, honestly, I don't see a way out. The psychologist smiled, knowing that this question was an important milestone. We start with small steps. First, recognizing that what you're feeling is valid. Second, understanding that adversity can be the ground for your growth. I'll show you how, but I want you to trust the process. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just going to take it one step at a time. Lucas took a deep breath, for the first time feeling a spark of hope. He didn't know what the journey would be like, but something in the psychologist's tone made him believe that perhaps there was still a way to recover and to come out stronger than ever. Lucas went home after the session, his head full of thoughts. The psychologist's words echoed in his mind. Resilience is not about avoiding pain, but about learning to use it as fuel to grow. He wanted to believe that, but the reality seemed overwhelming. In the days that followed, Lucas tried to follow the psychologist's advice. He made a list of the challenges he faced and tried to see each one as an opportunity for growth. But every time he sat down to do something practical, like reviewing his resume or texting a friend who had drifted away, anxiety would take over. Just opening his laptop would make his heart race and his mind fill with thoughts like, what if I fail again? What if no one wants to help me? I'll end up worse off than I already am. Lucas felt like he was stuck in quicksand. The more he tried to get out, the deeper he seemed to sink. He began to doubt himself again. Maybe the psychologist is wrong. Maybe I'm hopeless, he muttered to himself one particularly difficult morning. It was as if every small action required an absurd amount of energy that he simply didn't have. One night, while aimlessly scrolling through his phone, he saw a notification from a longtime friend, Marcelo, who he hadn't spoken to in months. It was a simple message. Hi, Lucas. How are you? It's been a while since we last spoke. Let's schedule something? Lucas stared at the message for minutes. Part of him wanted to respond immediately, but another part hesitated. What am I going to say? That I'm lost? That my life is a mess? He left the message unanswered and went to sleep, feeling even more isolated. In the next session, Lucas shared the episode with the psychologist. I felt like I was a fraud. How could I respond to Marcelo when I don't even know how I am? I didn't want him to see the disaster I've become. The psychologist listened carefully before responding. Lucas, did you realize what happened here? Your trauma is causing you to isolate yourself. This isolation is a form of protection that your mind has created, but it also prevents you from building resilience. Responding to that message could have been a small step in the right direction. But how? Lucas asked. I feel paralyzed. Every time I try to do something, it seems like everything inside me screams for me to give up. This happens because your brain is prioritizing fear over action, explained the psychologist. The trauma has programmed you to avoid discomfort at all costs. But the secret to resilience is to face discomfort little by little in a controlled way until it loses its power over you. Lucas sighed, still skeptical. And how do I do that? Let's start with something simple, suggested the psychologist. Today, you're going to send a short message to Marcelo. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just something like, "Hi, Marcelo. I'm going through a lot, but I appreciate you sending me a message. Let's talk soon." Lucas hesitated, but agreed. When he got home, he opened the messaging app and typed exactly what the psychologist suggested. Before he could change his mind, he pressed send. The response was almost immediate. "Sure, Lucas. Whenever you need me, I'm here." When he read the response, Lucas felt a mixture of relief and surprise. The small action seemed insignificant, but it opened a gap in his isolation. It was as if for a moment he had proven that there might still be people willing to support him. The following week, Lucas began implementing other small actions suggested by the psychologist. He dedicated 10 minutes a day to reviewing his resume without worrying about finishing it all at once. He also made a list of people he wanted to reconnect with, starting with his closest and least intimidating contacts. Of course, not every day was easy. There were times when he felt exhausted, as if all the progress he had made was temporary. During one of these setbacks, he returned to the counselor's couch and vented, "It feels like for every step forward I take 2 steps back. Is that normal?" The counselor responded with an understanding smile. "Lucas, absolutely. Progress is not a straight line. Resilience is built like a muscle. You have to go through ups and downs to strengthen it. The important thing is that even on the hard days, you keep trying." Lucas thought about this. He began to see his setbacks not as failures, but as part of the learning process. Over time, he noticed that the bad days were becoming less frequent, and that little by little, he was starting to feel stronger. Lucas arrived at his next session with a different look on his face. He was still carrying the weight of his hardships, but there was something new in his posture, a small, almost imperceptible spark of determination. He looked at the psychologist and said, "I sent that message, and it was weird, but it made me realize that maybe I'm not as alone as I thought." The psychologist smiled. "That's a great start, Lucas. You've taken a step out of isolation, and every little step matters. Let's build on that. Today, I want to show you what it really means to be resilient, not just surviving challenges, but using them as fuel to grow." Lucas frowned. "Grow from this? To be honest, all I want is to go back to who I was before all of this." The psychologist nodded, understanding. "It's natural to want to go back to what felt most comfortable, but I want you to see resilience in a different way. It's not about going back to what you were before. It's about becoming something new, something stronger, something you maybe didn't even know you could be." Lucas looked at him, intrigued but still skeptical. "And how do I do that? Because honestly, all I feel right now is that I'm stuck in this cycle." The psychologist took a notebook from his desk and drew a simple graph with a line that went up and down like waves. "Imagine that this line is your life. In the highs, you experience moments of victory, joy, confidence. In the lows, challenges, losses, failures. Resilience, Lucas, is what happens after the bottom. It's the process of transforming those falls into opportunities for growth." Lucas stared at the chart as the psychologist continued. "Resilience isn't about ignoring pain or pretending everything is fine. It's about looking at challenges head-on and asking, what can this teach me? How can I use this experience to rebuild myself in a way that makes sense to me? And how do I do that?" Lucas asked again, with more curiosity than doubt this time. The psychologist leaned back in his chair and explained, "There are 3 main pillars to building resilience: self-reflection, small, consistent actions, and social support. You've already started working on two of them, reflecting on what's holding you back and reconnecting with the people around you. Now I want you to start taking small daily steps, he continued. I'm going to give you a simple exercise. I want you to think about a time in the past when you faced something difficult and overcame it. It could be anything. A challenge at work, a difficult relationship, even something small that seemed big at the time. Lucas thought for a few seconds. I think it was when I lost my scholarship to college. It was a huge blow, but in the end, I managed to find an internship and gradually paid for my tuition. It was hard, but it worked out. Perfect, the psychologist said. What did you do during that time that helped you overcome it? Think about the small decisions, the choices you made. Lucas smiled slightly, remembering. I forced myself to keep going, even when it seemed impossible. I made a plan and followed it one day at a time, and I think I also asked for help. My parents and friends were very supportive. Exactly, the psychologist said. That's resilience in action. And now you can apply the same strategies. Break the problem down into smaller parts, create a plan, and surround yourself with supportive people. But most importantly, you need to recognize that the same Lucas who overcame that challenge is still here. He just needs a push to remember what he's capable of. Lucas was silent for a moment, absorbing the words. Then he asked, what about the bad days? Because sometimes it feels like, no matter how hard I try, I just go back to that dark place. The psychologist nodded. Bad days are part of the process. Resilience isn't linear, Lucas. It's not a straight line upward. There will be setbacks, and that's okay. The important thing is not to judge yourself for them. Instead, ask yourself, what can I do today, even if it's small, to help me move forward? Lucas took a deep breath and replied, so it doesn't matter if the progress is slow, as long as I keep trying? Exactly, the psychologist said. Resilience is like building a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger you get. And what seems impossible today can become manageable tomorrow. By the end of the session, Lucas left with a new perspective. He still didn't know how the journey would end, but he was beginning to understand that the process was more important than the destination. For the first time in weeks, he felt like there was a way out, and that he could, in fact, bounce back stronger. Lucas left that session with a mix of hope and fear. He knew he would need to put into practice what the psychologist had suggested, but the words echoed in his mind. Resilience is like a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger it gets. That night, Lucas sat down at the dining room table with a notebook. He began writing down small actions he could take to begin rebuilding himself. Review my resume, respond to another friend's message, go for a walk. Each item seemed insignificant, but the psychologist had been clear. Small, consistent actions can lead to big changes. The next morning, Lucas decided to start with something simple, reviewing his resume. He opened the document on his laptop and for a moment felt the old weight of anxiety. Thoughts began to invade his mind. What if I'm not good enough? What if no one wants to hire me? This is a waste of time. He felt his palms begin to sweat and his heart race. But this time he remembered what the psychologist had said about taking discomfort one step at a time. He closed his eyes for a moment and focused on his breathing, feeling the air move in and out of his lungs. Just 5 minutes, he told himself. I'll work on this for 5 minutes, and then I can stop if I want. By the end of the 5 minutes, Lucas realized he had revised half of the document. Surprisingly, he felt motivated to keep going. By the end of half an hour, the resume was ready. It was a small victory, but it was enough to ignite a spark of confidence. Maybe I can do this, he thought. Over the next few days, Lucas began incorporating small actions into his routine. He set aside 15 minutes to search for job openings online. He began going for short walks in the park, using the time to reflect or simply observe nature. He also decided to respond to a few more messages from friends he had been avoiding. Not every day was easy. There were times when the old feeling of paralysis would return, but Lucas was learning to recognize these moments without judging himself. He began to see them as part of the process. Today was not productive, but tomorrow is a new day, he would tell himself. One of the hardest parts of the journey was dealing with the fear of rejection. Lucas had identified that one of the reasons he avoided sending out resumes was the fear of not getting a response or being rejected. He shared this with his therapist in one of the sessions. Lucas, the therapist said, fear of rejection is common, especially after a trauma like the one you went through. But rejections do not define your worth. Every no you get is one step closer to finding the yes you need. Inspired by this idea, Lucas set a goal for himself, to send out 2 resumes a day, regardless of the outcome. At first, each submission felt like a leap in the dark, but over time, he began to see these small acts as accomplishments. Each resume sent was proof that he was trying, that he was moving forward. Another important part of Lucas's journey was rebuilding his social circle. He had isolated himself for months, but now he understood the importance of social support. On one such occasion, a friend commented, "Lucas, you seem more present lately. I can see that you're trying to get back on track. That's inspiring." Those words had a profound impact on Lucas. He began to realize that even in his vulnerability, he could be a source of inspiration to others. Of course, there were difficult days, times when Lucas felt exhausted, as if all the progress had been lost. On those occasions, he turned to the tools he had learned from the psychologist. He used grounding to reconnect with the present, practiced deep breathing, and most importantly reminded himself that setbacks were part of the process. Bad days are like storms, the psychologist had said. They pass. And when they pass, you realize that you're still standing. After a few weeks, Lucas began to notice changes. He felt less overwhelmed by his tasks. Job interviews, while still challenging, no longer seemed so daunting. He even began to take an interest in personal projects that he had abandoned, such as learning to play the guitar. With each small victory, Lucas felt more confident. He knew there was still a long way to go, but for the first time in months, he felt like he was in control. Resilience, he realized, wasn't a destination. It was a process, a set of daily choices that together created something bigger. Months had passed since Lucas had begun implementing small changes to his routine and mindset. Sitting on the couch again, his posture was noticeably different. He stood straighter, his shoulders relaxed, and there was a slight smile on his lips. When the psychologist asked how he was feeling, Lucas responded with a tone that mixed surprise and pride. "Better. Not perfect, but definitely better." The psychologist smiled, noting Lucas's obvious progress. "And what changed?" he asked. Lucas paused before answering, as if reflecting on the path he had traveled. "I think it was everything, the small steps. At first, it seemed like nothing would make a difference, but little by little, things started to fall into place. Sending that resume, responding to a message from a friend, getting up from the couch to go for a walk. All of these seemed insignificant at the time, but now I see that these actions were what started to pull me out of the hole." He continued, "I got a new job. It's not exactly what I used to do, but it's something that excites me. I'm learning new things and feeling useful again. Plus, I started playing the guitar again, something I had put aside for years. It feels like I'm reconnecting with parts of myself that I had forgotten." The psychologist nodded, encouraging Lucas to continue. "That's incredible, Lucas. And how do you feel about this progress?" "I feel stronger," Lucas replied with a sparkle in his eyes. "Not because things have gotten easier, but because I can deal with them in a different way. Before, I thought I needed to eliminate pain in order to move forward, but now I see that it's possible to grow with it. It no longer controls me." The psychologist took the opportunity to reinforce an important point. "What you're describing is the essence of resilience. It's not about erasing adversity, but about finding new meaning in it. What was once a paralyzing experience is now part of your story, a story that you are consciously writing." Lucas smiled, but quickly added, "There are still days when it's hard. There are times when I feel that weight coming back, like everything could fall apart again. And what do you do in those moments? The psychologist asked, with genuine interest. I remember what we learned here. I take a deep breath, focus on the now, and give myself permission not to be perfect. I've learned to accept that bad days are part of the process. Instead of fighting them, I try to navigate them. The psychologist responded with a satisfied expression. That's a powerful lesson, Lucas. Resilience is not a permanent state. It's a constant practice. You are developing tools that will accompany you for the rest of your life. As Lucas looked at the couch where he had so often vented, he realized how far he had come. He remembered the first sessions, when it had seemed impossible to move on, and compared it to the man he now saw in the mirror, someone who, although he still bore scars, had learned to grow from them. I realize that I am no longer the person I was before all of this, Lucas said. And you know what? That's a good thing. I think I am a better person now. Someone who understands that life will not always be easy, but that it is possible to find strength even in the most difficult moments. The psychologist agreed. This is what we call post-traumatic growth. Not everyone who faces adversity reaches this point, but you manage to transform your suffering into an engine for your growth. This is resilience in practice. Lucas also shared that he had reconnected with old friends and had even helped one of them, Marcelo, who was going through a difficult time. I told him what I had learned here, that you don't have to carry everything alone and that every little step matters. It was strange to be on the other side, but I think it made me realize how much I had changed. The psychologist smiled. Helping others is a powerful way to consolidate resilience. By sharing what you have learned, you reinforce those lessons within yourself. At the end of the session, Lucas looked out the office window, where the sun was beginning to set. He took a deep breath, feeling a calmness he had not experienced in a long time. He knew the journey was far from over, but now he had something he had lacked before, confidence in his ability to face whatever came his way. I don't know what the future holds, Lucas said, but for the first time, it doesn't scare me as much. I think that whatever the challenge, I will find a way to deal with it, the psychologist concluded with an encouraging message. And you're right, Lucas. Resilience is not about having all the answers, but about trusting in your ability to find solutions, even in the most difficult circumstances. You didn't just survive, you grew. Lucas left the office that day feeling different. He knew the resilience journey was ongoing, but now he was equipped with the tools, the mindset, and most importantly, the courage to move forward, stronger than ever. The psychologist ended the session with Lucas, but his story didn't end there. Lucas was now a living example of what it means to bounce back stronger. Proof that resilience can be built even in the most difficult times. And that's exactly what I want to share with you. If you're watching this video and you feel like Lucas did at the beginning, lost, directionless, stuck in a cycle of doubt and fear, I want you to know that this isn't the end of your story. You may be at your lowest point right now, but what I want you to take away from this is that resilience isn't something reserved for special or naturally strong people. It's something you can build step by step, day by day. The science of resilience shows us that the brain is adaptable. You're not stuck by your circumstances or past experiences. With small, consistent steps, you can train your mind to deal with adversity in a healthier, more productive way. This doesn't mean that challenges will go away, but that you will learn to face them with greater strength and confidence. Think about the pillars that helped Lucas. Self-reflection, understanding your challenges and acknowledging your emotions. 2. Small, consistent actions. Doing something small every day, even if it seems insignificant. Social support, surrounding yourself with people who encourage and value you. These pillars are not complicated, but they do require practice. And most importantly, you don't have to do it alone. I want to ask you a question. What is the smallest step you can take today to start rebuilding yourself? It can be something as simple as sending a message to someone you trust, taking a walk, or even writing your thoughts in a notebook. Small steps have the power to create big changes. Just like Lucas, you too can find new meaning in adversity. The trauma or challenges you faced don't have to be your final definition. They can be the starting point for something bigger, a version of you that is stronger, more confident, and more resilient. Remember, resilience is a process. It's not about never falling, but about always finding the strength to get back up. You have that strength within you, even if you don't fully see it yet. And I'm here to remind you of that. If you like this story and believe it could inspire someone you know, share this video. Sometimes, all we need is a spark to start the transformation. And if you want to continue learning more about resilience and personal growth, subscribe to the channel. Every week I bring content that can help you face life's challenges with more courage and balance.